Well, I want to thank everyone so much for joining us today for EBMUD's Landscape Advisory Committee General Meeting with a special presentation on sheet mulching for professionals and other integrated pest management tips. We are in a meeting format today, not a webinar, so you do have access to turning on and off your video and your mic. So this would be a good time just to turn it off, and then we will have a chance to turn it back on. My name is Kristen Bowman, and I'm a water conservation representative with EBMUD, and I'm joined by a very inspiring group of people today: Dr. Chris Geiger, Kristen Gallego, Lauren McIrvin, and Suzanne Bontempo, and also a couple of my colleagues, Anya Kamanskaya and Geneva Gondak. And I will get into a little bit more about their backgrounds in just a minute. Before we get going, just a few things on logistics. This meeting is recorded, so by participating, you do agree to be on a recorded meeting. I am going to be sending out the recording and the slides in the next couple days, so you can be sure to know that you're going to be getting that, and also links to many of the resources that we talk about today. You have access to the chat, and please feel free to chat with anyone or everyone during the meeting. And we will have somebody also online answering chat. And at the very end of our presentation, we will have a Q&A. And if we have time, we'll do a breakout session so you guys can talk shop with each other and get off your, and unmute yourself, etc. So before we get going with our special presentation, I do have a few announcements. Just a reminder, we do have all these landscape rebates. We have a standard landscape rebate that's for converting lawn to a low water garden, and a super, which emphasizes best practices, and a median strip rebate for those hard to water median strips, and also irrigation upgrades for like conventional controllers to smart controllers and high efficiency nozzles. This is a super good time to take advantage of these rebates. And to help support you with that, we have a virtual landscape rebate office hour. And this can be for you or your customers. It's been really super popular to get online with folks and talk in real time about situations that they're coming up with through their rebate process, available on Tuesdays at noon and 5 p.m. And if you haven't already done this training, very good qualified water efficient landscaper training that starts on Monday, June 20th, and is online. And then a statewide event, the annual Water Conservation Showcase. This is free and virtual and is in July and August. There are a couple sessions, I think, in person, one at our Lafayette Reservoir. And there is kind of a water energy nexus focus for this this conservation showcase. So go ahead and pop online and see what looks interesting to you there. And then a few things we've been working on here in-house at EBMUD. 4 years ago, we did I Heart My Garden photo contest, and we're looking at doing that again this year since we've had a couple years of drought, and opening that up to HOAs and CII as a way to promote their own landscape conversions. And last fall, a really strong, resounding request came in from our LAC meeting to create a payback calculator. And that was really to look at how long does it take to get your money's worth, in a sense, of converting a lawn to a low water garden. And we are working on that. We're tinkering on it in-house, and have asked our LAC project committee to weigh in on that. So maybe by this fall or winter, we'll have more to share with you on that. And then because of the drought, we are looking at the landscape design assistance program again. I know we have been talking about this, and we're looking at that again as maybe a way to help promote our landscape program. It's really incentivizing working with a designer to help folks create a beautiful garden, which then will be inspiring to others. And just, you might not know this, but we have a new EBMUD Water Smart Garden YouTube channel, and many of our webinars are in English and in Spanish. And I find it really helpful. People ask me a lot about gray water, and then I can tell them what I know and then refer them to this webinar. And there's all kinds of webinars in this YouTube channel, which I will be sharing with you the link in our follow-up email. So, some of you have been following this project. We have been working on it for a while, but it's really taking off, and it's the Gardens at Heather Farm Climate Discovery Garden. And this garden is really to help inspire folks for, transforming their landscape in something that will work in a warming climate. So it's a 15,000 square foot area. There's a ton of people who are helping to support this. Hunter, an urban farmer, and Allied, and Lori Palmquist, Julie Leinhart, Judy Dale, and of course working with Joan Lucchesi and Jerry Peck, and then and Sharon Gibson. So the idea is that the irrigation will go in this summer, planting in the fall, and that will be for the first phase. And there's plenty of room to get involved because we have a whole second phase to go, but it's going to be gorgeous. So looking forward to this. So I'll look a little bit about our drought situation. EBMUD is in drought stage 2, and we did have the driest water year on record from January to March, and we are in 10% mandatory water reductions district-wide. And this is from our 2020 levels, so 10% reduction from 2020. And this is really an all hands on deck approach. We're not finger pointing at anyone, but all team players, all of our customers working together to get to our 10% water reduction. The 8% drought surcharge does go on the water bill starting in July, and that goes on all accounts based on how much water you used. And then our Section 28 water restrictions have gone in effect. All the ins and outs on that are on ebmud.com/drought. Few highlights on that: no more than 3 non-consecutive days of irrigation, irrigate between 6 p.m. and 9 a.m., and no irrigating public turf mediums. The excessive use penalty is also in effect. That's for residential only, over 16,000 gallons a day. And there is a fine that is associated with that after a few warning letters. You might have heard about the State Water Resources Control Board ban on watering non-functional turf, and this is kind of an emergency temporary ban on watering non-functional turf. And I know there's maybe some questions on what is non-functional turf, and we're going to put some guidelines on our own website about that. And I'll be sending this link out too for you to take a look at that more closely, this ban. But one question I thought was helpful that came up in a meeting that I was in last week was from a park person who said, is passive turf considered non-functional? And what they meant by passive turf was turf that is used for picnicking or for throwing the frisbee, but it's not necessarily scheduled play. And so from our point of view, that would not be considered non-functional. And I know we could probably spend the whole meeting on this slide here, lots of questions on this, but we have a lot to cover today. So you can talk to any of us offline at EBMUD and the Water Conservation Division, and maybe Anya can be helping you with that in the chat. For any questions you might have on this. Okay, so let's just take a look at where we are with our 10% goal. So there's a lot going on this chart, but if you look at this number right here, here we are in the month of June, and we're at 13% less water production than 2020, which is our baseline. So we're doing really well for the month of June of getting to that 10%. Keep up the good work. We got a little bit of rain in June, and that was super fun. So now to our special presentation, which is sheet mulching for professionals and other integrated pest management tips. So with us today, we have Dr. Chris Geiger, and Chris just launched his own company called Lacewing Collaborations. He was also formerly, I think for 17 or 18 years, with the City of San Francisco Department of the Environment, and he was the Green Purchasing and Integrated Pest Management Program Manager. We also have Kristen Gallego, and Kristen and I met on a lawn conversion rebate program, and she did the super along with her customer, which includes sheet mulching. Our super rebate requires sheet mulching. And she said, we love sheet mulching. That's all we've done for the last 10 years is sheet mulching. And so I was like, you got to come to our LAC meeting. And she was kind enough to say yes. So Kristen and her husband own the Artistic Turf Company, and she's the incoming CLCA president. Also here with us is Lauren McIrvin, who is the owner of Allied Landscape, and he's the current CLCA president, and Suzanne Bontempo, who is the Our Water, Our World program coordinator, and also owner of Plant Harmony, and she's going to dive in a little bit deeper on plant choices and how to avoid pests with plant selection. So with that, I am turning it over to Chris. And Chris, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Can you all see my screen? Yay, okay. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm going to talk about a tool that we developed at Department of the Environment. I'm sort of straddling my role here between my job at SF, which is now winding down, and just consulting. But this is a labor of love, and it's worth sharing all of the work that went into these resources in what we're calling pest prevention by design for landscapes. Just by the briefest way of history, we have been working on pest prevention in various environments for many years at Department of the Environment. We put together under a CDC grant a set of guidelines for structures, which you see here. That's seen quite a bit of uptake. That was our crew working in affordable housing. The scared guy there was the intern who had never seen so many cockroaches in his life. And we were thinking about landscapes, and the IPM Technical Advisory Committee in San Francisco had been talking about this for years, about how important bad designs were to their lack of ability to do work. And this is a scene, city in Brazil, 20 years later, looks like this. Well, we humans have big impacts on landscapes. We're kind of like a fungus in this picture, and we can also have a lot of impact by making the right choices. So that's where this project came from, and had a big work group, which probably has familiar names. I'm not going to go through this for you, but we had a project on pest prevention in landscapes, specifically, that we rolled out last year. And what we did was we went through, well, I didn't put the process in here, but we scoured the world for scientific data, for anecdotal data, professional data on design elements that can help to control pests. And by pests, I mean weeds, insects, rodents, and anything else that's there where you don't want it to be. And then we put it through a peer review process with all those professionals who you saw on that other list. The notes about using those guidelines is they are, of course, about landscapes, not structures. It's an emphasis on design and retrofit. It's not about managing an existing landscape so much, which was kind of a fuzzy boundary in some places. And these are at this point, these are guidelines, not standards, of course. I mean, these are a set of recommendations and resources. And it's important here because, first of all, you can't pry all this stuff apart, right? Pest management and water use are very tightly connected, and what kind of materials you're using, and there are it's all about doing it right. So the chapters that are in this resource, you will find a section on maintenance plan development, which is something I never expected to be working on with this resource, which has things about how to set up your system if you have your own extensive landscapes that you're managing. How to include maintenance and sanitation infrastructure and physical designs, things like that. In our case, how to clean the equipment so we weren't carrying little shreds of Arctotheca back and forth between the golf course and the parks. I'm going to kind of just skim through these chapters for you to give you an idea of what's there. There's a whole section on soils and water, and as it sounds like, how to use soil and water factors to inform plant selection, which you'll hear more about from let's see, I think several of you, Kristen and Suzanne. Managing soils to reduce pest populations problems. A few things in there. I mean, preventing soil compaction. when you're doing a landscape redesign or installing a new landscape, how to avoid, to plan where your trucks are going. There's a lot of details in these guidelines. Planting designs, of course, are another chapter. Prioritizing plant diversity, avoiding invasive plants, choosing pest-resistant plants, designing with the whole area in mind. One example here, selecting plants not favored by rats. This was a favorite one for us in San Francisco because ivy seems to be everywhere, and just FYI, rats love ivy. And when it's growing up the side of a building, you may well find yourself with problems. There's quite a bit on physical barriers in landscape plans, the kinds of physical barriers, and that includes mulches. There's a fair amount of information on different kinds of mulches in this. So this is about restricting pest infestations using those barriers and, choosing your mulch carefully. So again, this is how things all tie together: water conservation and weed prevention. Weed control, there's some sections on how to use wood chip mulch correctly, for example, different kinds, and how to use, or preferably not use, well, actually how to use inorganic mulches near structures. This is actually a pest prevention factor or element for structures, is to keep the termites farther away from foundations to prevent ant infestations by not having a lot of organics up against the building. And here's what I was getting to. And consider not using geotextile weed control, especially with rock, especially with stones on top. We had all kinds of feedback on that one about bad experiences with trying to hand weed after you've installed these things and the weeds kept poking through. There are some resources on tools. There's some tools you might not have heard of, like wire barriers for rodents in tree wells in urban areas. These have proven pretty effective in areas like where I'm working. When you've got rat burrows all around the main public library, you got to do something besides throwing poison around. So there are other alternatives here. Section on sanitation. Things like boot brushes, of course. This is especially relevant for natural areas work. The need to screen seeds and nursery stock before you plant it. Minimizing refuse as a pest food source for rodents, for example. Preventing new pests or diseases from coming in. A lot of discussion about how to properly inspect the plants that you are putting in and to pre-inspect. And Phytophthora is a big issue these days, and that is something we all have to be aware of. I can only just scrape the surface in 10 minutes, but I want you to just understand basically what's there. There's a lot of information. There are two ways to use them. They are accessible for free on the Department of the Environment website at this point, and I will put the link into the chat when I'm finished. We have one version that is kind of a PDF book style download that you can click on that. And within each listing, you will see the kinds of pests, what stage it's applicable at, design or retrofit, some details, what it is intended to do to the pest, trade-offs with other design objectives. Is there an aesthetic trade-off to putting gravel by the foundation? Well, yes, there is, but maybe the rat prevention is more important. And then there's also a small database of tools as part of this. And of course, this is something that needs to be regularly updated. So if you access these guidelines the other way, which is our online database that you see here, you will find that you can access that tools database. So you'll see these 3 tabs at the top of the screen. One is the tactics, which you're seeing here. And there you can sort and search for them in various ways. And then there's a whole section on tools. And some of these you've probably heard of, and maybe some of them you haven't. And then there's a separate tab on references if you want to go to some of the original material where these suggestions came from. So you can also look at the page in different ways. There's this gallery button to look at it in this sort of layout, or you can select chapters and it will sort itself out into different chapters like this. So this is not something that can very well be presented in 10 minutes to you all. You almost have to get in there and explore for yourself. We'd love to know if it's something that's useful. It is alive. It's intended to be a living document. It's going to need continual updating into the future, and we're still figuring out how that's going to work. But I would encourage you to have a look. And I think I made it on time, didn't I, Kristen?
Yes, you did fantastic.
So happy to answer any questions people have about this.
I think we're going to keep moving on and then at the end do questions. But yeah, really thank you for sharing that all-inclusive tool. And I think a lot of people might not know about it. For, you know, that's there for use with all those resources.
Okay, and I'm putting the link into the chat right now. So.
Okay, great. Oops, I did not do that right. Ew, we're just going to go through these. Sorry about that. Okay, well, thank you, Chris, for sharing that. And we are going to move on to specifically diving deeper into sheet mulching. And Kristen Gallego with Artistic Turf is going to talk us through her experience with sheet mulching for commercial and residential properties. So you can go ahead, Kristen.
Awesome. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. As Kristen said, my name is also Kristen. My husband and I own Artistic Landscape. We've been in the industry for about 20 years now, and we started out strictly residential, and now we are mostly commercial. We've done a lot of sheet mulching over the years, and I'd just like to go over some of it you're gonna already be familiar with. Hopefully I can add value and maybe give you some things that you aren't familiar with. I wanna go over more of what we've experienced and what works for us. So here's just a visual of the basics of sheet mulching. Obviously you have your existing lawn or whatever you're putting your cardboard over. You have your layer of cardboard, your compost, and your mulching along with your new plants. The benefits of sheet mulching. Sheet mulching is a layered mulch system. It helps to improve soil health, manage weeds without herbicides, and increase soil permeability. You can use sheet mulching. You can do the process of sheet mulching over bare soil or on top of cut or flattened weeds or turf. You can suppress weed growth without chemicals, reduce labor and maintenance costs, improve nutrient and water retention in the soil, encourage favorable soil microbial activity in worms, enhance soil structure, and improve plant vigor and health, often leading to improved resistance to pests and diseases. Converting lawns with the process of sheet mulching offers a lot of environmental, economic, and societal benefits, including up to 50% water savings, anywhere between 30 and 70% maintenance labor savings, reduced runoff, and reduction of greenhouse gases. In addition, For every acre of turf that's sheet mulched, you keep 87 tons of sod out of the landfill and you prevent the use up to 10 pounds of herbicides. This is a basic overview of some of the benefits, and then I'm going to go into a little more detail about them. So this is a tool. I pulled it from lawn2garden.org. A lot of you guys might be familiar with it, might have worked on it with Stop Waste. And it's a calculator to kind of give you an idea of if you're converting an area of lawn, it takes you through the process to let you really know kind of how much water you could potentially be saving in doing so. So this is just a quick run through of you know, you select your city, kind of the area that you're looking to convert. And then you kind of put in your totals of how much ground cover, perennials, shrubs, you know, the water usage, is it very low, high water usage even, and then you check the box for sheet mulching, and it's going to kind of spit out a number of how much you're saving compared to how much you were using with watering a lawn. So congratulations. Yep. Congratulations. You've saved 93,000 gallons per year. So even if that is not a, you know, not the exact number, even if it was a portion of that, you can only imagine how much you're saving by converting these areas, these lawn areas. Here's a little bit more about the benefits of sheet mulching and kind of where we get some of those numbers that we did a high view of. With that 3,000 square foot conversion, you'll prevent 12,000 pounds of sod from being sent to the landfill. 60 pounds of carbon will be going into the soil every year. You'll prevent 9,600 pounds of greenhouse gas emissions from the decomposition of sod in the landfill. So I'm just going to take you through a little bit of the process with and without sheet mulch, so you can kind of get an idea and see the benefits and just how it works overall. So if you aren't sheet mulching, this is the process that we've, you know, taken in the past. We're going to turn down the irrigation to 50%. We don't want to completely dry it out and make it harder to remove, but we definitely want to turn it down and not have heavy sopping wet sod. You're going to use a sod cutter to remove it. You're going to have to haul it away. You're going to have to dispose of it. You're going to use your shovel pick. You're going to remove any left root base of the sod, trench around the edges to create sloping. And then you're going to do your planting, topsoil, make sure your irrigation's installed, and then install your mulch. Now, when we're doing the process with sheet mulching, here's how it differs a bit. And again, this is our process. Some may have had different experiences. If you go online, there are different processes to it. This is what works for us. We turn off the irrigation at least 2 weeks prior to the work. Now that creates an additional savings to your client during that period. They're not spending money on water. Then once the lawn has dried up or the area has dried up a bit, we're going to weed eat or mow it as low as possible. If needed, you can spray the area with herbicide. We try and not. We were having this conversation just before the presentation. We've personally not had too much of experience with the properties that we've done conversions with of weeds or otherwise that pop through, but there are a few cacua and thistle, knapweed that have the potential. I know Lauren's going to be doing a slide after myself, and he can touch a little more on that. He's had a little more experience with that as well. Then we are not going to have to tear out the grass, the sod. So we're just going to use the shovel, the pick. We're going to trench around those same edges, create that sloping at the edge to install our mulch. We are going to do planting, topsoil and irrigation. Now, here's where we may differ a little bit from what you've seen before. A lot of people at this point before they plant do sheet mulching. What we've found after trial and error and many years of doing it, we find that by installing our irrigation and our planting under the cardboard, that we have better, that we have our crews have an easier time installing. It doesn't get torn as much. And just overall, it ends up being a better product. So we do our planting, topsoil irrigation, and then sheet mulching. Now, one thing you have to be aware of is you want to obviously make sure that your irrigation is top notch. And if you're putting it under cardboard, you're not going to want to have to tear that cardboard up to make any repairs. So you're not going to want to have to make any repairs until that cardboard is gone. We installed the compost and then the mulch. So I have a couple notes there. Just make sure all your old irrigation is capped. And then if sheet mulching, if tearing in the sheet mulching occurs, you can use staples. You can also, there are some areas that you may need to double layer the cardboard. So this is from personal experience. These are kind of taken from numbers from our experience. Just to show you the savings that we've found with converting lawns with sheet mulching. To convert without, I went through the process. So if I look at the labor for having to cut the sod, roll it up, load it for dumping, remove any left sod base and trench the edges, it takes our crew for that 3,000, and this is based on that 3,000 square feet, a two-person crew on average 20 hours. I'd use $31 an hour. That's $1,240. You have to rent a sod cutter. Maybe you own a sod cutter, but you had to pay for it. So that has to be included in your calculations. And then you've got disposal fees. The average rate that I've found is $138 a ton to take it to the dump. You have 12,000 pounds. You're up there. So you're over $2,000 in cost to convert that. And obviously we're not talking about all the other things that would be the same between sheet mulching and non-sheet mulching, just the basics. So converting with sheet mulching at that same one, we have much less labor. We're not having to haul away that debris. We're not having to cut it out. So I based it on a two-person crew, 16 hours, same $31 an hour. We have 992. And then the sheet mulch or the cardboard, based on 3,000 square feet. It's on average 12 cents per square foot, 360 bucks. We're only at $1,300. We've now saved over $900 or about $900 to sheet mulch as opposed to non-sheet mulching that same area. So these are just a couple examples of just the process and how it works. Let's go to, we have a couple before and after pictures. So these were areas that were recently done. I know Lauren's going to have some more mature, I believe, pictures to show you. This was a recent conversion. Here was the lawn that was sheet mulched, and to the right is planting and and then this one is actually Lauren.
Okay, well, Kristen, thanks so much. You did definitely the hard lifting. I got called in on this project, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have my company, Allied Landscape, help out and be part of the CLCA, is where I met Kristen. Both of us serve and volunteer here in the East Bay. California Landscape Contractors Association is just a great place to network with other landscapers. I know Kristen and I have talked about landscape ad nausea, so I'm going to take over where she left off and just touch a little bit on a project. But before I do, I did want to thank EBMUD. very specifically for having the super rebate. And as much as it might seem like a pain in the neck for landscapers out there or clients out there to say, hey, why can't we just get at the money without having to go through these extra hoops? It really gave us an opportunity as a landscape contractor to talk to our clients about soil, to talk to them about compost, to talk to them about mulch. And I'm so glad that we had a water district local here in the Bay Area that stepped up and said, hey, it's more than just taking this grass out. It's about sustainability. It's about saving water. It's about doing things right and not leaving a wake of damage in our way, because taking out grass can be pretty hard to the soil. By and large, if you're taking a heavy stance with those walk behind sod cutters, you're really super compacting that soil, especially if you're dealing with it at the time of year where there's any type of moisture that's in place. We really get to a position of super compacting the soil. So having a different opportunity, having an opportunity to talk to our clients about a different way that might cost a little bit more, but that is now being offset by an unbiased agency like EBMUD is just absolutely fantastic. And Allied Landscape really appreciates that. The other thing I wanted to talk about is just the resources that are on this call. I got to see a lot of old faces that I haven't seen in a while. Susan, great to see your face. I got to see Lori, who's out there, and she was mentioned in the Heather Farms project, which is really exciting. She put together a great irrigation design, and Allied Landscape will be out there with her, but just a whole host of folks. Got to see Dave Phelps, who for me really gets me thinking about soil, thinking about sustainability in a different way. So I would encourage anybody on this call right now to really use that chat, because Dave Phelps, just fantastic with all things related to sustainability, all things related to soil. I'm really excited to see him. So with that, I'm going to dive into a project that we called 794 Davis. This project is located in San Leandro, owned by Wells Fargo Properties. And at the time that this project was completed, right around circa 2015, LEED was something of note at Wells Fargo Properties, and having LEED-like properties. And it allowed us to have conversations, not unlike the conversations we're able to have now around ESG, about how can we do things a little bit different from a corporate standpoint to be a little bit more sustainable, have a more positive impact on the environment, or have less of a negative impact on the environment. So this particular project was about 30,000 square feet. And we were able to get in there because of clean access and really take advantage of access, rebate, and the plant palette that was readily available at the time that we actually had grown at our growing grounds to really offer a great opportunity to this client at a reduced cost. I think the things that don't get talked about, though, that we were able to go to Wells Fargo Properties and discuss was, it's not just about the impact on water cost or the impact on maintenance cost. It's also irrigation repair cost. There were tons of large trees out there that needed to be replaced because they were heaving concrete and impacting the foundation. And had we just gone status quo and just had the irrigation with a 30-year-old system out there, inevitably, we end up with irrigation rigid piping that gets broken. So as everybody tries to put together this cost ROI calculator, I think there's more to it. The water savings is not that exciting because we don't charge folks enough money for water. Water's too cheap. We should be charging more. It should be treated as a finite resource that it is, and we would see ROIs that are faster. So it's critical, and what was critical for the success of this project was for us to talk about some of the maintenance reductions we were able to give them in terms of cost, in addition to talking about some of the ancillary costs that went into keeping that turf looking great and dealing with the irrigation. Some of the benefits that I know really came into play for this particular site that wasn't touched on was the amount of noise. There was a lot of visitors at this particular building and a lot of employees that were at this particular building. Having our crew out there once a week and giving haircuts to the grass once a week was a distraction. And we had to do unique things, trying to find odd hours of the day. But ultimately, putting the right plant in the right place has so many benefits. It's from irrigation to chemical use to noise reduction to reduced emissions, like Kristen mentioned. There was just a ton of opportunities. So I know this was a single slide, but I'm glad I got to participate, because to anybody in the chat, if you'd like my contact information, like Kristen at Artistic Turf, Allied Landscape is really in it to make sure that the Bay Area has the best, most sophisticated landscape professionals in the country. And we want to be able to go to our clients, especially our corporate clients, and show them how we're doing things the way it could be done elsewhere in the country, where either the politics or the motivations just don't align. So I want to thank East Bay MUD for letting me attend. And if I can be available for any questions, I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for that. And super excited about this project too, because it's very large and there was no herbicides used, right?
It's true, but I will say we did luck out. While Kristen and I both got to avoid herbicide use, and we do everything we can to do just that, the existence of Bermuda grass, the existence of Kikuyu grass in the Bay Area has long history in the Bay Area, and having to deal with that and deal with that properly so sheet mulching doesn't get a bad name is really critical. We've had projects that we've had to sheet mulch and let sit for 6 months before actually planting. So part of this is really identifying what those pests are. Chris talked a little bit about pest. Weeds are a pest. And there's a few of those pests that can really sabotage the success of your project. We lucked out on this one. If you see the picture, it's a healthy stand of dwarf fescue grass, really easy to eradicate. But the concept of eradicating Bermuda grass and Kikuyu grass can be very difficult and needs a very thoughtful approach.
All right, very good. Maybe we can dive into that a little bit more at Q&A. So thank you, Lauren, for all that, and the kudos to EBMUD, but it's really through many of our partners that we came to the conclusion of super rebate with CMPS and 50% native plants and stop waste of not bringing our lawn to the landfill to create methane. There are just immense amount of benefits. And this was just a quote that you had, Kristen. For all of you to read. So with that, I'd like to introduce Suzanne Bontempo, who's going to talk to us more about climate appropriate plants and how to reduce pests in the landscape.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for inviting me to join you this afternoon. Yes, I'm very excited to talk about how we can reduce pests, how we can reduce maintenance, and how we can save water by choosing climate appropriate plants. So many of us are familiar with the phrase or the concept of planting the right plant in the right place. I just want to share that this is bigger than just what those words are sharing. When I hope I can help you to understand, or you most likely already do understand, that when we can choose California native plants or Mediterranean plants that are climate appropriate, we are going to be able to save water and reduce maintenance and reduce pest problems when we can match those plants to the conditions of the landscape. That when we can match these plants to the conditions of the landscape, they're going to grow with more ease and be less stressed over time, which will make them less susceptible to pest problems. Understand that when plants become stressed because of lack of water, or they've outgrown their place, or they're getting pruned too much, or they're not getting the right sun or nutrients, or drainage in the soil, then they will become stressed out and they will start to show signs of pest problems. They'll become more attractive to pests, and they can over time show signs of decline. So something else to keep in mind is we have a lot of choices nowadays, and we can choose plant varieties that are going to be less disease and pest prone. We can choose these pest and disease resistant varieties, or learn from our mistakes and plant alternatives to plants that were more prone to pests and diseases. And then also understand that planting the right plant in the right place will require less maintenance over time. So growing climate appropriate plants, what does that really mean? We hear a lot about California native plants as being, the best thing to be planting in our landscapes right now. However, climate appropriate, let's just dial it in with a narrower lens and look at what is going to be appropriate for our Bay Area climate. Let's look at California natives and Mediterranean native plants that are going to be drought tolerant. As they become established, they'll require less water. And as they're becoming established, they will thrive and grow with a lot more ease. Okay. And then also understand that climate appropriate plants will also be more water efficient. And when they're more water efficient and when they can thrive during times of drought or with less water, as they become established, they can get through those dodgy areas when we have excessive heat out of nowhere or an irrigation break or anything like that. So they'll be a little bit tougher, and they'll be less prone to get pest problems or less desirable to the pest because they won't be as stressed. They'll actually be stronger and thrive with more vigor in the landscapes. Some examples of these plants, well, there are so many beautiful California natives that are appropriate. Some of my best resources that I always like to refer to would be the WUCO's website, which is the Water Use Classification of Landscape Species website, which is through UCANR. They have a very extensive plant search database that can, you can find a plant for any situation, let's just say. And then my favorite is calscapes.org, which is part of the California Native Plant Society. It's their plant searchable database, which is just fantastic. And these databases will show also the habitat that it's going to support, birds, butterflies, and so forth, as well as water usage and so forth. And then when we add plants to a landscape, we're always going to plant them with similar needs. So something to keep in mind is that when we're planting plants together with similar irrigation needs, that's very important. This is similar irrigation needs once those plants are established. And that's called hydrozoning. But then we also want to keep in mind the other microclimate needs, such as the sun exposure, how much shade, how the shade moves across the property, the wind exposure, the heat, how water moves through the soil, and if there is a grade on that landscape. These are all things to keep in mind when we're adding plants. And then just know that some plants, are really prone to pest problems, and look for alternatives that look very similar or will grow in a very similar, way. So such as this Lavatera, it's gorgeous, but it is prone to rust, and it is most likely going to get rust throughout its lifetime. So regardless, if we want to avoid, it doesn't even matter. You can spray all the eco fungicides you want. It's still going to get rust. So let's look at something that's going to be a nice alternative, which is the Aleagne, the blue hibiscus, which has a very similar growing habit and similar growing conditions, which is wonderful. It's a wonderful alternative to a plant that would otherwise get a pest problem. And then this is something for many of us that have been in the industry a long time. Phormiums. Phormiums are just many plants fall under this category. They have a tendency to outgrow the space. So, we go to the nursery, we read the tags, we've done our research, we buy the plant, and it is not unusual for sometimes that plant was not tagged properly, or we grabbed the wrong variety, or we read the specs wrong. We plant it, it looks great, but then a plant that we wanted to max out at 3 feet by 3 feet is now growing, 5 to 6 feet by 5 to 6 feet. And it's, now we're pruning it all the time. And it doesn't look as great, and it's more maintenance. But then over time, not only is it more maintenance and it doesn't look as great, that plant becomes stressed from getting pruned frequently. And a plant that's getting pruned frequently is going to then be more susceptible to some pest problems, but then also show signs of decline and have a shorter lifespan. And then this is just another example, trees. We really want to, this acacia is the specs on it were like 20 feet to 30 feet by 20 feet to 30 feet. Well, that 10 feet was a huge span, and this happened to thrive really well because the soil conditions and the water conditions, everything was perfect. But this tree happened to get significantly pruned hard about every 5 years. And over time, what we started to see was some wood decaying fungus developing on the tree, which was signs of a shorter lifespan. But then also you'll see in that picture on the right, the irrigation. We have to remember to adjust the irrigation as the plants move. That irrigation band should have been moved out at the drip line years before this. So just keep in mind that there's a lot of things that we're doing in the landscape or things that we're not doing in the landscape that can actually cause more stress to our plants, which will actually cause more pest problems. And then soil should not be an afterthought when we're adding plants to the landscape. We want to build healthy soils with compost and absolutely take advantage of all the benefits of sheet mulching whenever possible. But the goal is to have about 5% of organic matter in the soil and in the form of compost. It's very easy to add compost to the soil at time of planting or top dress around root zones for established plants. Compost is going to improve that soil structure. It's going to allow more air it's going to aerate that soil for harder compact areas or soils that are more clay-like, where it's going to allow sandier soils to kind of stick together and hold their structure. Compost holds 5 times its weight in water. So not only does it help with water infiltration when we amend the soil with compost, but it also allows that water to stay in around that root zone in a healthy way. It retains water in a way that really is beneficial to our plants. And because we've increased the microbiology in the soil, now the root zone is able to grow and expand and really become much healthier and then be able to access water and nutrients with ease. And when we add compost to the soil, we're also reducing the need for chemical fertilizers and pesticides, which is a win-win. Something else I'd like to share is when we choose our plants, I'd really like to encourage you to choose plants that attract beneficial insects and pollinators, because when we can attract beneficial insects and pollinators, we're actually increasing the health of the overall ecology of that landscape, the overall ecology of that garden. We're looking for beneficial insects that are going to come in and eat or parasitize pests. So it keeps that balance. So yet one more reason why we can reduce using those pesticides. And then of course, inviting in pollinators, it will just increase the overall health of the garden itself. And flowers, or I should say plants that we want to look at, we want to include a diversity of flowering plants to provide that pollen and that nectar to attract those beneficial insects. We want to look at flowers that grow in clusters of tiny flowers, such as yarrow or ceanothus, and flowers that look like a daisy, such as the erigeron, the coreopsis, even cosmos. These are going to be really important and beneficial for a lot of our micropollinators that really prefer smaller flowers to gather their nectar and pollen. And then I just like to give a shout out to the Habitat Heroes. If we are not able to, completely do a huge landscape remodel or redo, or if we're just looking to kind of change one section, please consider some of these Habitat Heroes. These are proven to attract a larger variety of insects and other animals in the landscape, really to provide higher level of nutrition and value to the ecology of the landscape. And what I can share is that these will give you the most bang for your buck. We've got the buckwheat, the manzanita, California native oaks. Now you might say, I don't have space for an oak, but you might have an oak that's already on the property that you've just been kind of struggling with. Well, understand that California native oaks might be one of the most, the richest, most valuable plants for the ecology of that garden, for that habitat. And then of course we've got ceanothus and salvias and culinary herbs. Letting our culinary herbs go to flower provides so much for the ecology of the garden. I invite you to do that. And then lastly, I'd just like to share that so many of us have been trained just to deadhead and cut back and prune and make sure everything looks tight and pretty. But I'd like to invite you to change your lens and to see that allow plants to grow through their entire life cycle and see the beauty in that. When we can allow the asters, which bloom through the winter months for a lot of our pollinators, if we let them go to seed, then that's food for our birds and a lot of other critters in our landscapes. Allowing the Japanese anemones and clematis to go to their fluff stage, which provides nesting material for a lot of our birds, and then letting a lot of plants go to berry, our native plants that will go through berries such as elderberries and snowberries, provide a lot of nutrient rich food for our birds and other critters in the landscape. And then acorns. Acorns, provide food for more than 100 different vertebrates throughout the landscape. So really, this is high nutrition that is such an important part of the food webs of our gardens and landscapes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was excellent. And I love looking at all those beautiful pictures. So this is our time for Q&A. And, just as a reminder, what we have covered, we covered a lot. We covered water, drought restrictions. Chris Geiger gave us an overview of disease prevention by design. And then we heard from Chris Gallego and Lauren McIrvin on sheet mulching successes that they've had for residential and commercial properties. So you might have some questions on that. I think we might be all up to date on our chat. Let me just look. Okay. Yeah, there is a question about Bermuda grass. And, if you've had success, Lauren or Kristen, with Bermuda grass and not using herbicides, maybe using more than one layer of cardboard as an alternative. I have heard of like multi-layers, and that tends to work, of cardboard.
The only thing that's worked for me, and it was really just testing it at one of our yard locations, is we left it alone for the better part of a year, which really isn't realistic. We broke it up into pieces. Every quarter we would dig in and see where it would come back and get rooted. And we really had it spread out into 4 different plots. For us, it was a thing of time. In all honesty, I might not be the best person to answer. Dave, I don't know if you're out there and you've bumped into any things, but we have deferred to chemically treating it. Not unlike what Anya mentioned, that physical removal where it makes sense, but it's a complicated plant and there's a lot going on with that plant, and eradicating it is pretty tricky stuff.
What about sheet mulching on roots? Like we do have an HOA right now who has they have a lot of redwood roots on a slope. And the slope is turf, but you also have a lot of redwood roots. So the question is, should you sheet mulch over those roots with that? And there's kind of thin soil. How would you approach that lawn removal on that slope, which has redwood roots?
Again, it's a tricky one, but usually those surface roots really, those particular surface roots that are typically above and out of the soil, they're not a whole lot of absorbing roots going on. They might be anchoring and things like that, but they're not at heavy risk of damage. What we typically do is when we dig down the edges that's required, we really feather that back and we end up with a lot of extra soil. We mix that with 50% bioswale mix that has a whole lot of great infiltration. It's great. It's got decent organic matter. It's got good sand. And we mix it and we would cover those roots personally. I would not conform my cardboard just over that. I would be working with the soil. And I think something that doesn't get talked about enough is we've got a chance to change the topography of the soil with the excess soil that we generate. I think we're all used to seeing these flat landscapes. If you can change the topography, you can make it interesting without impacting drainage negatively. You could really change the overall look of the landscape. Dave, I know you're out there. You want to speak up? I feel like I'm second fiddle to something you might bring to the party, but any thoughts?
He's saying besides more cardboard layers and larger overlaps. So larger overlaps. Yeah, and I wondered if Kelly Schoonmaker, she's on the call, wanted to talk a little bit about sheet mulching on hillsides where there's roots. I know we started to dive into that. It's a tricky one. See if what you have. I don't know, Kelly, if you'd like to turn your mic on and speak about that at all. She's had lots of different experiences with all kinds of different sheet mulching, and she has put a little bit in the chat. She got rid of Bermuda grass with sheet mulching only. The only problem I had was dealing with the stuff that creeps over the sidewalk. So she probably used more than one layer. Kelly, feel free to unmute if you get a chance to weigh in on this. And then there was a question that came in about non-functional turf, if HOA are included in that non-functional turf ban by the state, and the answer is yes. Not like in front of people's homes so much, but common areas that are not considered, recreational or passive play. So they are considered part of the CII sector, and they are included in the ban on watering non-functional turf. Anybody want to chime in on solarization of Bermuda? Have you tried that, Lauren?
No, but I come from a landscape family, and when black plastic was something that was a bit of a fad, my dad used to put that down. He's got a little bit of farming in his background, so he does believe in it. I've never done it myself. I think there's something to it. I think it would work. I think you just need to be diligent, and it's all about the edges and making sure that you really get a good coverage if in fact they're using plastic. My dad used to do a little bit of that with black plastic, but this is a few decades back, to say the least.
Yeah.
I saw a question from Suzanne asking about the process that we plant prior to rolling out the cardboard. And again, this is just what we found works for us. It's easier. Our guys don't feel like they're walking over it so many times, creating holes in it. I think the question was based on how do we eliminate the lawn? The same, whether we're doing it either way. We just stop watering for at least 2 weeks. We want it really dry. We're going to weed eat or mow as short as possible. So you're pretty much working with, you know, that flat just space with currently non-growing lawn, non-watered lawn. So it's the same either way. We just plant in that and then roll it out and cut it. So if you had maybe your question was a little bit different, and you can let me know if not, but I mean, if so, but otherwise that would be my answer.
Yeah, it's a little bit different, and it's a little bit different than what's taught. What's taught is you put the cardboard down first, then you plant. And so that was interesting about what Kristen does and her team is they plant first and then put the cardboard down. So they reduce compaction and reduce the possibility of breaking the cardboard, then allows the weeds to come up. So I'm pretty sure you do it on everything, Kristen, right? You always plant first.
Correct. We have found that when our crews were rolling it out first and then going over and and planting and cutting and doing everything, they were getting a bit frustrated because obviously it's cardboard, it can tear. They're doing more seams, they're doing more layers, they're, you know, putting it together. So they've found throughout the years that it's easier just to plant, and then as you're rolling out, cut those holes and put it over your plants, and then you're still walking on it to lay mulch, but otherwise you're not walking on it as many times.
Great. Bob, you're welcome to unmute yourself. Bob Eagle asked to ask your question.
Yeah, Kristen, actually just an observation. Lauren, when we talked about solarization, I think what we're talking about is clear plastic like they do in farms that lets the sun through and brings up the heat, the temperature of the soil. I work with the Contra Costa Water District. We've had one customer do that, use clear plastic, put it down, and very interesting results is that half their yard that never, that was full sun for most of the day, everything was dead. The other half, the yard which got shade from the house, what we saw was basically a tropical rainforest where that lawn was as green and as lush as you can be. So it's only going to work if you're like, have no trees or no houses, nothing that will shade that lawn, for the majority of the day. So it's just not very viable in a residential setting.
Mm-hmm. Lots of information coming in on the chat. So lots of links and stuff. Any other questions? You're welcome to raise your hand if you have a question and then unmute yourself. Lindsay, go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much. This has been really interesting. I had a question. I don't know if it was answered. I wrote it in the chat a couple times, but I've just kind of heard different people saying different amounts of times that they plant after sheet mulching. And I wanted to know kind of what dictates the timeline of when you should be putting in plants after sheet mulching, if it depends on the type of grass that you're trying to get rid of, or if it's the plants that you're wanting to install. Just wanted some more information on that, if anyone could answer.
Yeah, we get that question a lot from our customers who are doing our super rebate with the sheet mulching. Like, can they plant right away, or should they have the cardboard down for a certain amount of time? What is your experience, Kristen and Lauren, with that?
So for us, now again, going back to, I know Lauren touched on some of those invasive things that take a little more time and the experiments he's had with putting down the sheet mulching for longer. But for us, it's an immediate process. We put down the sheet mulching and then we do the planting. It's just a continual process. We don't set it down for a certain amount of time and then plant.
Yeah. And then Lauren, did you have anything you'd like to add to that?
No, it's all driven based on, to me, time of year, right? We've got a good time of year to plant and we don't. So excluding the hottest the hottest months of the year. We're planting in the spring, we're planting in the fall whenever we can. In terms of what would drive a delay, it has everything to do with the invasive plant species or pests that are in place. If you don't have those, to me, there's no delay. More than anything, I think soil conditions, making sure we're not working in soil that's too wet is a big deal. Anytime we go tromping around, especially with these small little tires of wheelbarrows that are non-air filled wheelbarrows, or these small sod cutters, or even our foot, a boot in soil that's just too moist, we're really doing a lot of super compaction there. So outside of the wrong time of year based on not enough water or the soil's too wet, has everything to do with invasive plant species for me.
Kristen.
Yes, Georgia, yes.
Yes, I also typed a question that I don't think I got an answer to. I'm wondering about planting with a really flat ground cover, something like a Fragaria on top of the sheet mulch. Has anybody tried that? And was it effective? Rather than a shrubby ground cover, but a more perennial ground cover?
No problem at all.
No. So did you start with 1 gallons or flats?
Not flats. Good question. Mud flats would be tricky, but no, we are starting with 1 gallon. The
Okay.
idea of getting past all that wood chip layer, I get the question, but we are starting with 1 gallons.
Okay, because that's good to know, because we do have clients who like a really nice flat ground cover, especially underneath trees, etc.
Absolutely.
So that's great to hear. Thanks.
Yes, Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, Kristen, I'm sorry, I don't mean to drive you crazy, but I have more questions for you, because I find that it's in the details that clients don't want to sheet mulch, or that the contractors don't want to sheet mulch. So just to clarify one thing that you said, if you're sheet mulching over a lawn, when you dig those plant holes, you're just using a shovel and digging through the existing lawn?
Correct.
Okay. And then if you're not sheet mulching over a lawn and the soil is really, really bad, are you doing any amending up front? Or are you just 100% relying on the sheet mulch?
Amending of the soil that you're planting in?
Like would you do, yeah, so like would you do a pit prep if you felt that the soil was either almost hard pan or incredibly heavy clay or anything like that?
Good question. I'm trying to think of examples of projects that we've done that might meet that. I mean, for the most part, what we've done are, you deal with the different clay type soils or what have you, but nothing that's been extreme, where obviously we amend the soil and maybe create a little bit larger hole and amend the soil there, but not,
And
not
then,
beyond that.
do you have how thick do you usually lay the mulch on top?
The mulch on top of the
When you
cardboard,
finish? Yeah.
about 2 to 3 inches.
Okay, so standards, you're not doing anything extra
Mm-mm.
high. Okay.
No.
And then I would expect that you're cutting the lawn real short before you.
Yeah, of course, once it's dry and hopefully somewhat dead, we cut it as short as possible. Yeah, the goal is to cut it as short as possible.
Okay.
And then you probably dig a pretty big hole around the plant, so you don't have the lawn interfering with the plant roots.
Correct. So correct. And so as you cut that, that hole in the cardboard, you have less likely to, everything coming up or right around the plant.
And I had one more question. This one might be better for Lauren. It's good to see you again. It's been a really long time.
It has been.
I had a client who sheet mulched in advance about 6 months ago, and they could not find rolled cardboard anywhere locally. And so I'm on the Walnut Creek side of the Caldecott Tunnel. So that's my general area. And they ended up having to order it somewhere and have it drop shipped. And it made it really complicated. Most of my clients would not do that. It doesn't seem to be at the irrigation supply stores anymore. I don't know if you have a more local place, Lauren, where you're getting it.
I could circle back. The truth is, I'm not doing the purchasing personally anymore. And at the end of the day, what I used to use though was stopwaste.org, Rescape. They had great resources. I went on there and I found multiple vendors that specifically had cardboard available and in humongous rolls, different dimensions. So I would imagine we're still using some of those vendors. You're right, they are not irrigation vendors for the most part, with potentially the exception of Urban Farmer. I think they do some specialized things, so I would at least search out Urban Farmer. But the stopwaste.org website is still up. I would imagine Rescape has a lot of their resources, and they had great purchasing information on there. So I'd urge you to do that. And Susan, for you and other designers and architects on the line, as an architect or landscape designer, I would not change my planting specifications at all for what you know works. Just because you're doing sheet mulching shouldn't change the planting specifications that you feel work. If that's 3 times the diameter of the plant root ball, if that's 4 times, whatever you know to work, I still think you can work around those specifications that you know work for your clients in the past and use sheet mulch. I don't think it's this or that. I don't think you should be modifying those specs. I'd be sticking with them because I think you can find a way around it.
And to piggyback off that, Susan, I know you're in somewhat of the general area, and that's the general area we work in as well. Devil Mountain in San Ramon, they are a big vendor of sheet mulch. They have 3, 4, and 5 foot by 250 foot rolls. That's one of the biggest places we get them. As Lauren mentioned, Urban Farmer. And from what I've heard, there's a new product on the market that we're going to look into as well. That's a sheet mulching product called Eco Mulch. I don't know the specs on it or if it's going to be a good alternative, but just from what I've seen, it might have a lot of good benefits. So.
Yeah, and I think when you pay attention to participants in rooms like this, you see Urban Farmer here, you see Hunter Irrigation here, you see people like Devil Mountain. They are vested, they really want this to work and they really want to incorporate these new practices. So I applaud them. It's great to see their names on this line, and they are actively, they are here with us right now. I think I saw Doug Anthony here. I know I saw somebody from, I saw Christine, who's an amazing resource from Hunter Irrigation here. So a lot of people are in the chat, big help.
Yeah, and Anne-Marie from CMPS has been working with Orchard Supply and Hardware, and they're just getting up and going. They're going to be promoting the CMPS Bloom campaign, which is promoting native plants statewide, and their EBMUD rebates, and also they indicated that they're going to get into having cardboard materials. So not sure if that's quite there yet, but they're gearing up for all this too. And I think we're not going to get into breakout rooms unless there's a strong desire to. If there's a strong desire for breakouts, put a yes in the chat. Otherwise, I think we'll just stay here and wrap up because I think everyone's really benefiting from the questions that are being asked. Mahona, okay, you guys are reading everything that's in the chat. Let's see, Bermuda. Anything else? I think if at this point, if you have a question that you want answered, the best thing to do is to raise your hand, and you're welcome to unmute yourself, and we'll wrap up with the last questions if there are any. If not, you know where to find us. And, you know, the sheet mulching, I know it can be a little bit like scary or something in the beginning if you have never done it before, to see how it all works with how the lawn decomposes. And we've given you 2 different techniques, one planting in advance and one planting after you put your cardboard on, and you can see what works best for you. You want to, if you do have some tricky grass, you know, we do recommend using a couple layers of cardboard, which is really going to help. And you want to definitely get that lawn cut down real low, and then choose the right plants, you know, all the considerations for plants. And I really loved how you talked, Lauren, something that we didn't talk a lot about, but the mowing, the reduce of noise. by moving. That is a really interesting point, and for some reason I've never heard anyone say that, because it is a distraction at your home and at the workplace and in your neighborhood. All the blowing and noise of the lawnmower, and how that can be reduced by going low maintenance, low water landscape. So it looks like everyone's pretty satisfied. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. It was really lovely to be here with everyone. And it was so awesome to have all these experts with us today. Chris, Kristen, Lauren, and Suzanne, thank you so much for your time. Wonderful to gather with all of you. And I hope to see you soon in person. Thanks again.